Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, October 20th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. Expect a high of 84.9 degrees in Riverside today, with a low dipping to 57.6 degrees overnight, so plan your day accordingly with layers for the evening. Coming up, we'll examine the reasons behind President Trump's decision to slash all U.S. aid to Colombia amid escalating drug trafficking concerns, and unpack the uproar over a Marine Corps artillery exercise above Interstate 5 that ignited Governor Newsom's anger and led to scattered shrapnel incidents. Plus, other key stories on national security, economic shifts, and more. All this and additional updates coming your way on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. We're starting today's show with a major international story brewing tension between the United States and Colombia, where President Trump has just pulled the plug on aid and slapped on tariffs in a heated drug trade dispute. Joining me from the studio to break this down is our foreign affairs reporter, Ethan. Ethan, this seems like a powder keg exploding overnight. Walk us through what President Trump announced yesterday.
Thanks, Grace. Yes, on October 19th, 2025, Trump declared the end of all United States aid and subsidies to Colombia, totaling about $230 million for the fiscal year that wrapped up on September 30th. And get this, new tariffs on Colombian exports kick in as early as today, Monday, October 20th. According to NPR via the Associated Press, this stems from Trump's frustration with Colombian President Gustavo Petro's approach to fighting drugs, calling him an, end quote, illegal drug leader, end quote, and a, end quote, lunatic, end quote. Trump made the post on Truth Social and doubled down aboard Air Force One, warning that if Petro does not shut down drug operations, the U.S. will step in, end quote, and it will not be done nicely, end quote.
That's fiery rhetoric indeed, Ethan. For folks tuning in who might not follow Latin American politics closely, remind us why Colombia is such a big player in the global drug trade and how U.S. aid has fit into that picture historically.
Absolutely, Grace. Colombia is the world's top cocaine exporter, and since 2000, the U.S. has poured billions through Plan Colombia, a massive program to battle drug cartels and rebels, averaging over $700 million a year lately. That aid, detailed in Bloomberg Tax and Congress.gov analyses from today, October 20th, funded everything from military gear to help for displaced folks and Venezuelan migrants. But under Trump, it's been shrinking, with Congress approving $377.5 million for foreign aid this fiscal year, including $413 million on hold for anti-drug work due to Petro's policies. NPR and AP reports stress that the $230 million already spent supported peace deals from the 2016 FARC agreement and security ops. Trump's calling it a, end quote, long-term ripoff, end quote, claiming no real fight against drugs despite the aid.
Petro took office as Colombia's first leftist president in August 2022, shifting gears on drugs. How does his strategy differ, and is there evidence it's working or not?
Petro's mantra is, end quote, by growing life we banish drug trafficking, end quote, focusing on voluntary crop swaps, land reform, and jobs for farmers instead of the old bullet and bomb war on drugs, which he calls a, end quote, bloody failure, end quote. As covered by The Guardian and Al Jazeera today, eradication targets dropped 60%, from 50,000 hectares in 2022 to 20,000 in 2023, with manual efforts down 90% early last year. UN Office on Drugs and Crime data, cited in AP and Miami Herald stories, shows coca fields ballooning to 253,000 hectares in 2023, up 10%, pumping out up to 2,664 metric tons of cocaine, a 53% jump. But Petro disputes the numbers as overblown. On the flip side, Colombian Defense Minister Pedro Sanchez, per NPR and AP today, points to record seizures 884 tons in 2024 and 654 through October this year, an 8% rise. They've busted over 16,000 labs, arrested 3,000 crooks, and extradited 400 to the U.S. since Petro started, even using armed drones. So it's not zero effort, just a different tack that critics say is letting production surge.
And now military strikes are in the mix, escalating things fast. What happened with those, and how is Colombia responding?
Tensions boiled over with U.S. strikes, like the October 17th hit on a boat tied to the ELN rebels, set ablaze with no public proof of drugs aboard, as announced by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. It's the seventh since early September in the Caribbean, killing at least 32, including 3 just days ago on October 18th. Earlier, a September 16th strike killed innocent fisherman Alejandro Carranza, per El País reports today. Petro slammed these as sovereignty violations and, end quote, illegal interventions, end quote, ordering legal action against the U.S. Just Security and Chatham House experts via Al Jazeera today say they lack legal footing under the UN Charter, since drug smuggling is not an, end quote, armed attack, end quote. The Trump team cites a classified order labeling cartels terrorists, but scholars in lawfare argue Congress needs to authorize it properly. Petro fired back on social media, calling Trump, end quote, rude and ignorant, end quote, the main enemy of peace.
Economically, this could sting Colombia hard. Tariffs today on coffee, flowers, oil, and gold? Paint the picture.
Spot on, Grace. The Miami Herald and The Guardian from October 19th to 20th detail tariffs potentially gutting key exports, causing an 8 to 13.7% drop, a $1.1 billion hit, and 15,000 job losses by 2026, especially for small farms and apparel makers. Previous 10% tariffs in April already tanked August exports. Relief Web and AmCham Colombia, cited by India Times, warn the aid cut stalls peace and worsens inequality. Legally, it's tricky. The Impoundment Control Act demands Congress okay cuts within 45 days, and tariffs need probes that could take months under Section 232 or 301. Colombia might sue in the U.S. Court of International Trade or the World Trade Organization.
Elizabeth Dickinson from the International Crisis Group called this, end quote, befuddling and profoundly unwise, end quote, in NPR Today, risking a key alliance. Any broader fallout?
Exactly, Grace. The New York Times and Atlantic Council analyses today say it's undermining ties foundational since the 19th century, weakening Colombia's forces amid their worst security crisis in a decade, and complicating Venezuela issues. Protests here at home tie into U.S. politics, but this has Latin America on edge. The White House is mum so far.
Phew, Ethan, it's like Trump's turning the drug war into a tariff tango, stepping on toes all around. Thanks for that thorough rundown. Up next, our second story. And now, our second story this morning takes us to the heart of an explosive controversy at Camp Pendleton in California, where a Marine Corps demonstration for their 250th anniversary turned into a real blast from the past, literally. Joining me to unpack this shell-shocking incident is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what exactly happened during Vice President J.D. Vance's visit there?
Thanks, Grace. You're right, this story has everyone fired up. On October 18, 2025, just 2 days ago, the U.S. Marine Corps hosted an amphibious capabilities demonstration at Camp Pendleton in northern San Diego County. It was part of their big 250th anniversary celebrations, showcasing amphibious vehicles, aircraft maneuvers, and a simulated beach landing. Vice President Vance, a Marine Corps veteran himself and the first former Marine in that office since taking it on January 20, 2025, under President Trump, was there with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. According to a Marine Corps statement covered by Marines.mil and reported by Task and Purpose, the event aimed to honor the Corps' legacy with modern capabilities, promising rigorous safety evaluations and no public disruptions.
Sounds impressive, but I hear there were live artillery firings planned right over a major highway. Can you explain that part for folks who might not know how these howitzers work?
Absolutely, Grace. The controversy exploded over plans to fire live 155mm artillery rounds from M777 howitzer guns, which are towed artillery pieces that launch shells over long distances. According to the Associated Press in a story on mymotherlode.com from October 18th, they intended to shoot these shells across a 17-mile stretch of Interstate 5, or I-5, one of California's busiest north-south arteries, carrying tens of thousands of vehicles daily toward impact zones on the base. Marine officials, quoted in the LA Times and Times of San Diego, called these overflights routine for training, with safety measures like FAA temporary flight restrictions and notices to air missions from October 17th to 19th for VIP security. But critics worried about malfunctions sending debris onto the road.
And Governor Newsom wasn't holding back on that, right? How did state officials respond?
Spot on. Governor Newsom's office, in statements reported by the LA Times, KPBS, and on ca.gov, slammed the plan as putting President Trump's ego over public safety. He said, quote, "Firing live rounds over a busy highway isn't just wrong, it's dangerous," end quote, accusing the feds of poor coordination. A Vance spokesperson, William Martin, told CBS News and Yahoo News that Newsom was misleading the public and exaggerating for partisan gain. This sparked a clash between state and federal powers.
So did they go ahead with the firing? And what about the highway closure? That must have caused chaos.
They did proceed, but not without drama. California transportation officials, with the California Highway Patrol, or CHP, closed I-5 from Harbor Drive in Oceanside to Basilone Road near San Onofre from about 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Caltrans District 11 announced it on quickmap.ca.gov, as reported by the LA Times and Times of San Diego, on CHP's recommendation due to extreme life safety risks. CHP Border Division Chief Tony Coronado called it essential to avoid distractions for drivers, and it even halted Surfliner passenger rail, leading to hours of backups and rerouting headaches for commuters and freight.
Then came the premature detonation. Walk us through that scary moment.
Around 1:45 p.m., an M777 round detonated mid-flight over I-5, as detailed in CHP incident reports and corroborated by Marine spokespeople in the San Francisco Chronicle, The Guardian, and DVIDS Hub. Shrapnel rained down, denting a CHP patrol car's hood by 2 inches and grazing a motorcycle from Vance's protective detail, but miraculously, no one was hurt. Officers quickly alerted the Marines, who canceled further live fires. Colonel Pyrek of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force told Task and Purpose and Marines.mil it was a possible airborne detonation outside the impact area, and they've launched an investigation per standard range safety procedures to find the root cause. Captain Gregory Dreibelbis confirmed operations suspended without broader issues.
The fallout must be ongoing. What's the latest from both sides?
It is, Grace. On October 19th, Newsom's office, via ca.gov, and the LA Times and Hindustan Times demanded an apology from the Trump administration for this reckless vanity project, while praising the Marines' service and calling for better coordination. CHP's after-action review in their CAD logs, reported by Keat.com and Caliber.az, suggests clearer federal-state communication for future events. Vance's team, through Martin in Yahoo News and the Epoch Times, defended it as a tribute to Marine excellence and blamed Newsom's overreaction. The Trump administration hasn't responded directly, but as MyMotherLode.com aggregated from AP on the 19th, it's a cautionary tale for military drills near populated areas. No formal consequences yet as of today, October 20th, but it's fueling calls for live fire protocol reviews. Broader context from Wikipedia updates on the anniversary and Vance's tenure, plus India Times and iHeartRadio, ties it to U.S. state tensions under Trump-Vance.
Chloe, you've really unpacked this powder keg of a story. Thanks for joining me this morning.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. China's growth engine downshifted to 4.8% in the third quarter, the slowest pace in a year, as tariffs and tepid spending put the world's number 2 economy in a lower gear. That's a slide from 5.2% in Q2, though still in line with forecasts. The National Bureau of Statistics said the economy has withstood the pressure, with January to September growth also at 5.2%, but the road to Beijing's around 5% Annual target now looks tighter than a drum. Industrial production revved 6.5% in September, yet weak domestic demand and a property slump continue to throw wrenches in the works. Expect policymakers to debate whether to pump the brakes on caution and gas up stimulus in the final quarter. In Yemen, a storming in Sana'a Houthi rebels raided a United Nations compound, detaining 20 staffers, 15 international and 5 Yemeni, and seizing phones, servers, and computers. Among those held is Peter Hawkins, UNICEF's British country chief, a move that raises the stakes and the risks for aid operations in a nation already hanging by a humanitarian thread. The detentions come amid Houthi accusations of espionage within aid groups, claims the UN calls baseless and dangerous. The UN is demanding immediate, unconditional release of all personnel and the return of its equipment, noting that a total of 53 staffers are now being held by the de facto authorities. With life-saving assistance on the line, every hour counts, and every seized server could sever a lifeline. On the island of Cyprus, a ballot box plot twist. Turkish Cypriots have elected Tufan Erherman, a moderate who champions reunification, in a landslide, 62.8% to incumbent Ersin Tatar's 35.8%. Erherman's mandate points toward reviving UN-brokered negotiations for a federal solution, a pivot from Tatar's Ankara-backed two-state stance. Peace talks have been frozen since 2017. This vote could thaw the ice and reset the chessboard. Greek Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulides offered congratulations and readiness to engage, while Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan acknowledged the result and reiterated support for Turkish Cypriot rights. All eyes turn to an anticipated UN convening to see if this electoral breeze can lift the long-stalled sails. Beauty meets the beast of consolidation. Kering is selling Kering Beauty to L'Oréal for €4 billion, including the high-end fragrance house Creed. The pact grants L'Oréal exclusive 50-year licenses for fragrances and beauty under Gucci, Bottega Veneta, and Balenciaga, and pairs the rivals in a 50-50 wellness and longevity venture. Under new CEO Luca De Meo, Kering is trimming debt and tightening focus on core fashion amid softer sales at Gucci. For L'Oréal, this is its biggest buy yet, spritzing its luxury portfolio with niche fragrance clout. If regulators give the nod, closing is expected in the first half of 2026. The Gucci license switches over after Caudi's deal expires in 2028. It's a makeover with staying power, call it longwear strategy. And in Idaho, a shot heard, round the state houses. The Idaho Medical Freedom Act, signed in April and effective July 1, 2025, broadly bars public and private entities, including businesses and schools, from requiring any medical intervention, including vaccinations, for jobs, services, or admission. An earlier version was vetoed over concerns it would hamstring schools from sending sick children home. Lawmakers tweaked the language and passed it. Supporters hail a landmark for health freedom, while public health officials warn of collateral risks as vaccine-preventable diseases reemerge. Activists are promoting the law as a national template, with more than a dozen states eyeing similar prescriptions. In the debate over mandates, Idaho's dose is potent and contagious. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.